the presentations with this. I've changed it slightly to be a bit more 2021 PC anyway. A society grows great when the elderly plant trees whose shade they know they shall never sit in. Yeah, it's a nice way. I think it's an old Greek proverb. I think we should actually grow trees that we can grow, be under the shade as well. So from a young age, we should be encouraging kids to plant trees whose shade they could spend time under. Yeah, it's a nice one. But yeah, we can, I suppose it's like the Native American plan for the 7th generation into the future, you know, so we really need to think of that. So trees are at the core of that. That's just an aerial view of Kinsale College. It's nice and quite green. It's a few years old, but we're still finding little pockets where we can plant more trees or have meadows and things like that. But just as we're going through it, I'd like you to think of a couple of things that you can question yourself as we go through. So which trees have the most biodiversity value in Ireland? Say the top 3 or 4, and think of some memories when you were a child, like what sticks out as fond, fun-filled memories. So yeah, the most biodiverse trees that we have in Ireland for native trees, and then think about what sticks out memory-wise when you're having fun as a child. So here's another dilemma for you, or another question. I see environmental thinking as, do you want to be a producer or do you want to be just a consumer? And some of you might have been up to Bealtaine Cottage in Roscommon Leitrim area. It's a great place, and she has lots of videos on it there. She calls it Goddess Permaculture. I don't have the before picture actually, but this is the after picture, just an abundance of trees and biodiversity that she's planted over the years up there. Was of just a standard sort of green fields in the winter, and then browns in the winter, and then greens in the summer. But she's planted all these different edibles and native trees, and a lot of them from cuttings. You know, it doesn't have to cost a lot. I think one of the things she used to say there in Bealtaine Cottage is, if you come, just bring a tree for me or bring a plant. So in terms of, that's the other side, is I suppose just being a consumer buying stuff, and I think we need to get away from that and let's start, you know, becoming a producer. So what do we need to produce? We need to produce habitats, and essentially trees, meadows and wetlands are the habitats we need to reintroduce because we've gotten rid of so many of them. But we also need to produce as much food as we can, and even if it's on a windowsill or up to agroforestry, large scale, you know, we can produce food, or we can lobby, we can influence other people. We need to produce soil, so build soil, produce our own energy. So this is slightly off topic, but I think I've gotten 10 solar panels, and I have electric car. I've charged the car at home the entire time from the panels since April, you know. So whether electric cars are green or not, I don't know, but we can produce energy. It's possible to produce, and we need to produce more community. But anyway, mostly we're here to talk about trees. So how can you be a producer of more trees? Sorry, I just did that this morning, actually, just a whole list of a lot of the native trees and shrubs we have in Ireland. So I can give this presentation out, so if anybody wants any of the resources, and some other little extra bits underneath the slides in the PowerPoint as well. But we need to facilitate, you know, all the native species. So there's roughly 33 or 34. There's a good few varieties and species of willow, but there's a lot of things that we can have on our land, and that's some of the native bigger plants. And there's some smaller shrubs that'll fit in smaller gardens as well, you know, so you don't have to go big. But what we can do is start off with a nursery. So we start off with a nursery here in Kinsale College, and we collect trees. Sorry, the picture isn't that good, but yeah, so we have hazel and oaks there. At the back there is a huge amount of oak saplings. There's maybe 300 or 400 oaks there collected from Clyne, and hazel and birch and alder and various things in here. So you can do that on a small scale, you know, just get some sand and compost and a bit of leaf mold, old leaves, and sow the seeds in at this time of year. So now is the time to collect, and there's mast years where the oaks might be producing more seeds. You can make sure to collect seeds during mast years, because some years they don't produce any seeds. There's a great book there, Our Trees, A Guide to Growing Ireland's Native Trees. Make sure to look at that if you want information on how to produce seeds. So Dara mentioned about planting. I'm just going to mention one thing about planting. It's pretty straightforward, really, most planting, but you can add fungi into the whole if you wish. There's different debates about it, but it doesn't hurt anyway. This is called Chaos Fungorum. It's mix of mycorrhizal spores that they link in with the tree roots and help it to grow. It's in England now. I don't think they'll sell to us anymore with the Brexit, but you might find there's other sources of mycorrhizal fungi that you can add to the planting hole just to aid the tree. So again, I mean, fundamentally, you want to be organic. You don't want to be adding Roundup or any of those things that people try and burn off the weeds. Just try and protect the weeds, the tree from the weeds in the first couple of years is my advice, with some mulch and cardboard, which is beneficial, you know, so it's going to break down and it's non-toxic. What we try and do then, so that's the first step, is, you know, propagating them. We do buy trees as well, you know, try and buy trees that are from seeds grown in Ireland, but, you know, if you can't find it and it's a native tree, you know, don't worry too much about it. But there is trees that are grown from native Irish seeds. So this is out in Gurtin, a Crusher farm in Ballinspittle. Rob Foley, a former student, well, because we planted 1,000 trees there around the edge. So he's done a ripping with a machine, with a plough. It doesn't turn the soil, it just creates a little hole, and we planted the trees in there, and it actually allows oxygen and water in. And then he has orchards planted on the left here, and he has truffle orchards and nut orchards and fruit orchards, and he's starting a market garden, and he'll probably bring some animals in as well. This is an example of regenerative agriculture, which we need. We need much more than just back gardens. Not that that's a problem, but we need to go to a big scale, which is what we need to do, is transform the landscape. So also in Kinsale College, we've been planting and edible things around the town for a few years. So another organization, Future Kinsale, has just created this little map. So that's where we are up there. We have an orchard. You'll see the Solia orchard in a second, and then in the town centre we have various edible plants around the town. So that's nice, and then there's a digital app to go with it, so you can walk around and see what's edible. So it's nice to interact. I mean, I'm mostly not really for technology, but certain bits of technology are beneficial for maybe strangers as they come to the town, just to find their way around. That's the orchard you're seeing, so Solia there on the left hand side, and that was an orchard we planted a few years ago, community orchard. So it's a bit of a learning venue now. The scouts use it, and yeah, a bit more space on this side of the fence, so we're going to plant. There's another 50 or 60 or maybe 100, 200 square meters there we can plant up with more forest there. So it brings in the community. As I say, there's different people that use it, and yeah, it's a nice place to go. It doesn't look like much, but I'm gonna actually, this is where I was just showing the students this area. So there's a few non-native plants that I recommend as well. Like, well, this is bladder nut. It's one of the nut trees that's possible to grow. I haven't got any nuts on it yet. We're one of the first ones to grow it in Ireland, so we'll see in a few years. Chilean guava. This is an amazing shrub, beautiful strawberry tasting fruit. This one is, well, that's a native bloom, so it's a nitrogen fixing plant that supports biodiversity. We have Chihuahua, hawthorn, and then there's a quince there. We have actually I think they're the wrong way around. The nearer one is actually the Chihuahua hawthorn. It's Crataegus dubroviensis, and this is the first year it's fruiting, so we're getting really tasty berries, much tastier than the Irish hawthorn. Again, I mostly favour natives, but we have to eat, so there's other things that we can come in, just make sure they're not anyway invasive, and yeah, we need to eat. So, and underneath is just a whole array of wildflowers to support pollinators and everything, and it doesn't need to be all neat and tidy and have that ring around the trees where people are poisoning it with Roundup. You can have a mulch, but we have a sort of a stone ring with mulch there just to protect them with cardboard underneath. So this is all within reach to do for people. Yeah, so you want the meadows, and that's something we need to do. It supports so much biodiversity. We need all the wildflowers under the trees. That's actually a picture of this Crataegus dubroviensis. I can't remember which country that comes from again, but yeah, the hawthorn berries are only about a quarter of the size of these guys, and they're not half as tasty. But you can eat the hawthorn, the native hawthorn too. But it's nice to see it fruiting, so that's promising. This is another community project we did last year, just in between the lockdowns in December. There's a whole host of nuts and fruits planted behind in the city. So I think it's a lot of people try and make the city centres nicer with little, planters. But I think actually it's better to probably focus on suburbs where people might take a bit more ownership of the suburb if you get a good community and have some meetings before it and build up that community, then they will help to take ownership of the green spaces, you know, especially as they age and there's less children around. But there's still plenty of space for kids to play. So we've hazelnuts and aronia berries and gooseberries and apples and pears behind there. And then we've two growing areas here just for vegetables. And just if you're interested, that little metal thing is called a slug fence, and the slugs find it very hard to get over from the outside. It's quite a nice way to surround a vegetable growing area and prevent the slugs from getting in. So that's the second year students. So linking in with some of the local community estate members there. I'm a big proponent of growing nut trees there, the sort of main tree in any ecosystem, whether it's beech or oak or hazelnut and chestnut. So this is a mind map coggle that I've done up. That's the website you can do these on, with various trees there and how to grow them. I just put it up. I'm not going to read it all, but just to highlight, there's so many trees. Almonds, we have almonds grown in the college here. We've gotten our first harvest of almonds. The heart nuts are pretty easy to grow in Ireland. We have monkey puzzles in Fermoy. I think they produce most years. Quercus ilex, that's another type of oak that people use as ornamental. It's down by the bridge in Kinsale here. It's producing loads of nuts. So there's a whole variety of nuts that we could be growing and producing food and absorbing carbon dioxide. But on a bigger scale, well, within this, you can plant nuts. So we need like agroforestry. This is New Forest Farm in America with Mark Shepard, where he has 100 acres of agroforestry. You can see all the lines there. They're all along certain contours. And his animals grazing in between the rows of trees. There's no bare soil. He makes way more money than his neighbors who have just vast monocultures of corn. And yeah, so he's doing the planned grazing, which is what we need to focus on in Ireland. Is that basically we let the grass grow much longer. And Jennifer Riley in Kilkenny and Clunview Farm, she's doing brilliant work on that if you wanted to follow her on Facebook. And Clive Bright in Sligo is doing great agroforestry and managed grazing as well. And that really is building soil and providing habitats and niches and other crops and protecting the soil and getting away from monocultures. So that's agroforestry. We also try and do a lot of education. Obviously, we're a college here, so we really promote the forest school. Some of the past students have gone on to create forest schools. Thomas there, bringing some of the school kids around. We do that during the Green Week every year to promote tree cultures. I recommend this little book you can get from Seed Savers, the year-round organic school garden. It's a nice introduction for kids. So education is super important. And then, you know, being creative with trees, of course, is super important, which we've done here in Kinsale. This is where we built our own amphitheatre a few years ago. We started it around 12 or 13 years ago, and it's fully covered over now. The permaculture students built it for the drama students in collaboration, and it's based on Shakespeare's theatre in England, and that's what it looks like during a showcase. So we put on shows there most years, not the last couple of years, just the fire safety issues, but hopefully we can get them resolved soon and have it up and running again. So yeah, there's a lot of aspects covered there. That I mentioned about what's the trees with the most biodiversity. So to finish up, oak, willow, birch and hawthorn are some of the most biodiverse trees according to this research paper there for insects anyway. As I said, there's a good few varieties of willow, and we have the two main oak species here, but they all support their own insects and birds and biodiversity, lichen, fungi and bacteria. So again, diversity, try and plant as many native trees as possible, I think, just to support that diversity, but make sure there's always space for meadows and ponds and other things, because it's not just complete forestry. We need the gaps in the woodlands too. But thanks very much. Hopefully there's some pointers that might help you there, and please feel free to take down my email and number if you wanted me to answer any more questions. Hopefully you had some good thoughts of what you did in your childhood. Anybody want to put that in the chat?
Hi, my name is Niamh Ní Dhúill, and I'm a coordinator currently with LEAF Ireland, which is Learning About Forests Ireland, and also coordinating Choill Bheag. Rachel Geary, my colleague, is on maternity leave. She's back in December, so when she comes back, we'll be sharing the role. So now I'm going to run through a few slides here. I'm going to tell you a bit about LEAF and a bit about the Choill Bheag programme that we're doing. So I suppose LEAF, we started, it is, there is LEAF Global or LEAF International, and the programme came to Ireland and was funded from 2016 to 2020. Now that funding has stopped at the moment, but we have funding to keep going with the Choill Bheag, which is what we're focusing on. But LEAF Ireland would have also, over that time, the funding was very specific to Limerick City and around Limerick, and based around an amazing forest park, if you're ever near it, called Currachase Forest Park. And that's where so every school that we worked with, we did a workshop in their school grounds, and then we also brought them to Currachase. And for many of those students, that could have been the first time that they were out of the city and into the forest. And Ray, who will be talking in a few minutes for Hometree, he would have been a colleague with us with LEAF Ireland through all those workshops as well. So because there was a few of us working together on that. And just to give you an idea of the broader context, if you hear about like the environmental education unit within Tashka, LEAF is one programme, but most of you would have also heard of Green Schools, obviously Green Campus, which is running this event, Clean Coasts. So there's actually quite a few programmes in the unit, and we're one of those, and we all try, and there's the Climate Ambassadors, the GLOW programme, and we try and collaborate as much as possible in this work. So I suppose we're always trying to think you know, when you look at the bigger thing, which is, and this is an old saying that was going around for a long while, which is think global and act local. And I suppose now they announced, you know, the United Nations have declared this to be the decade, the United Nations Decade of Ecosystem Restoration, which is a big mouthful. But in that, as Donal was talking about, they're looking at how we protect and restore the ecosystems that we have been taking out in the last 100 years, and particularly probably the last like 30 to 40 years. And forests and woodlands would be part of that, but also wetlands and food systems. They're looking at the whole systems, and there's links to those that you can look up. And I suppose this ties in a lot as well. All this work would tie in with what would have been called the Sustainable Development Goals, which are now called the Global Goals. And again, there's 17 of those, and life on land might seem an obvious one for the work we'd be doing planting trees, but there's climate, and there's sustainable cities and communities. So you can look up any of those to see the links to these projects as well. And I suppose we're always trying to mark days, like last Thursday would have been Tree Day. And this year, the Tree Council of Ireland they've put forward the wild cherry tree as the tree of the year. So they pick a tree every year to kind of highlight the varieties, because as Donal was listing there, a lot of people aren't aware of the lovely range of trees that we have, and that all the different heights they can grow to. So there's always a tree for the right place. So I suppose one of the obvious things might be like, why is biodiversity vital? And I know this is a Climate Action Week talk, but I suppose when it comes to biodiversity, which is literally the biological diversity of life on the planet, it literally supports us to live on the earth. So if you're breathing, eating and drinking water, you know, we're all part of this system, because often the environment is seen as kind of something separate, something out there, and then we're here doing our thing. And it's that disconnection that's probably caused the biggest challenges that we're facing at the moment. In terms of climate, the biodiversity would give a stable climate, and it helps protect us from extreme weather events. So that's where they also have a role in flood defense, absorbing carbon, absorbing water. And one of the really important things they do is filtrating. So they're always cleaning the soil, water and air. And I suppose I put in the mushroom pictures there because as you did mention earlier as well, the mycorrhizal fungi that you could put into the soil when you're digging holes to plant trees. But generally, there is a way of thinking that people think when they see mushrooms or fungi that there's something bad. But when you're doing kind of the more permaculture or forest planting woodlands like this, seeing fungi is actually a really good sign, because it means that the fungal network that's under the ground, you're restoring that. And if you start looking into the fungal network, it's amazing what's going on under the ground that's kind of invisible. And for humans, we sometimes find it hard to put value on things when they're invisible. But if you start, especially at this time of the year, if you're in the woods at all, start looking at the mushrooms, and the variety is incredible. But just what they're doing, they're moving water and nutrients and helping trees communicate with each other. So there's loads of, that's a whole part of thing that we bring into the woodlands when we're out walking in the woods, or when you're planting trees. We do talk a lot about the mycelium under the ground, or the fungi under the ground and on the trees. And I suppose we put in a little picture there of, often people see things on leaves and they think it's a disease or a problem. But when you're looking at biodiversity, everything's connected and everything has different roles, and we don't always understand them. But on this, you've got the oak leaves, and on the back of them, they have little spangle galls. And galls are, what would you say, like a growth that happens. There's a creature comes along and lays her eggs in the bud of a tree. And in this case, it's probably a midge. Sometimes it's a solitary wasp. If you see, there's these oak apples, you'll see little brown or green balls on the oak tree, and a wasp again has laid her larvae in there. So again, there's all this interconnections with the insects, particularly with trees. So when people see a problem and they think they have to go out and do something, actually usually it's part of the natural system, and you're best to stand back and observe rather than run in and try and fix something. So I suppose Donal also talked about habitats, and that's really critical, and the ecosystems, just restoring them, and by planting trees. And when we're talking about Choill Bheags, we don't just, like, we do go in and plant small woodlands in the school grounds, but that could also be a native, a hedgerow, or a small food forest garden. So there's different ways of doing it. So I suppose like that, planting trees is one of the most important things we're doing for the future generations. But even right now, and as the speed of the trees and their growth rate, people often don't believe it, that they'll grow really well and quickly in Ireland, unless you're in a really exposed site. And in that case, you just do a different bit of a different planting, because you might need to get shelter belts in as well, well first, and then to protect your woodlands inside of that. So I suppose to give you an idea of the Choill Bheag, which is the little woodland, and it would have come from, well, I suppose people have been planting woodlands forever, but in Europe they started a program called Tiny Forests, which you might have heard of, and we would have worked with the people who were setting that up, and in the end we decided to call it a Choill Bheag, and we brought it in under the LEAF program, and we would have planted 6 in Limerick in 2018. And you can see here, I'll show you some pictures now that'll kind of show the stages, but just, we do plant bare rooted saplings, and then, so that's the window of opportunities, usually late October or early November to the end of March. Because outside of that, you're planting from pots, and that's a lot more expensive, and also the success rate mightn't be so high. So, but we work with the students for this whole process. So I suppose this year we are about to plant, well, I should say 2021 to 2022, we're going to be planting 11 more Choill Bheags. So 6 of them will be nationwide, because Coillte are helping to fund those. And we're going to be planting 4 in Cork, which are funded by Cully and Sully. And there's another one in Dublin, and we're training up more of the officers in the unit to help with these plantings as well. The one in Limerick that we planted, which was one of the first, and like everything, you're learning usually by your, well, mistakes or doing things. We decided to do things a bit differently. We did plant 2 trees per metre the first time, which was 400 trees in this 20 by 10 metre square area, whereas now we've actually reduced that down to 200, so it's 1 per metre that we plant. But we also include a space for a classroom to be able to sit. So there's kind of a natural, we leave a kind of a horseshoe shape, and then the schools can either put in logs or put in seating or whatever they want to put in there. And over time, we want to encourage them to develop nature trails. The big difference between maybe the tiny forest approach and our approach, well, one was school grounds in Ireland, we have space, whereas if you live in the cities in Europe, they often don't have any green space. They're pure concrete, or they're just really built up next to each other. And the other side of it was they were stopping people from going into the tiny forests because they wanted them to be a complete like wildlife refuge. Whereas we actually encourage the students to go in and out and explore the place, but usually at the back we have that as a kind of a no-go area, or the kind of wildlife sanctuary. But we want the students to be in and out and exploring it, but that can disturb the wildlife part of the time when they're in there. But we have decided that it's better that they're in connecting with nature rather than standing outside looking in at it. So I suppose we keep it site specific because everywhere is different, and we do have a bit of a formula and we have resources, but everywhere you have to be creative and flexible. So like that, one of the schools in Cork that we'll be visiting doesn't have much space. So we're probably going to do a little native hedge and a bit of a food forest as opposed to the 200 trees in the woodland. Or we might even put pockets of woodlands into schools and connect them through a hedge as well. But I suppose we want it to be accessible and affordable and replicable. So we have all the resources online, so anyone can go through the steps themselves, even if you don't have the officers coming in to help. And I suppose the big part is we really want to acknowledge the commitment from the schools and the teachers, because it's voluntary from their side, the work that they put in. So I suppose to give you an idea, that was 2018, and that was a corner in Scullwater Day in Limerick City. And the advantage of this area was you can see there's a walled area, so it's very sheltered. And we started, so again, very similar to Donal's, we use the similar technique where we mulch. So we plant and then mulch with cardboard and leaves or grass clippings or bark mulch that we get in from the local council. And so the picture on the right is with this, and that's the other thing, we erect signs on as part of it at the end. So you have a bigger sign explaining what's going on, and then we've smaller little signs with the names Osperla, Goiga, and kind of the lair that they are in the woods as well. So from our side, it's the educational side of things that schools really want as well. So to encourage the teachers to use it as much as possible, we try and have that information so the teachers feel that they know, have the information too. Because the biggest barrier we find is that teachers think they need to know everything, and that's often why they're afraid to bring them out. And we're trying to encourage them just to go out exploring with the students, but it helps if they have a little bit of extra information, and we provide resources for that too. So this will show you, that was 2019, so that was a year and a bit, maybe 15 months later, and you can see the growth rate. And it was a gorgeous sunny day and students were out in it, and you could even feel the shade. They could even tell the difference. It was cooler, and the amount of insects that were out, and it's become a lovely place for them to use. Now this is a really short video to show you, this was this year, 2021. So this is it 3 years later. Just mind your eardrums with the kids making their sounds. Hang on now. That's really to show you just the rate of growth. You can see, and we encourage the school to clip certain places where the students are running, you know, where they're exploring, just to stop branches going in the eyes, but also it's very obvious then where the trails are. Sorry. I'm going to just quickly go through just healing in, like we also create small tree nurseries, but when we're buying in a lot of trees or getting trees for the schools, we heal them into nurseries and then we take them out as we need them, or we get the trees delivered to the schools and we instruct them as how to protect the roots so that they can be pulled out when the time for planting is. So healing in is like a temporary storage place that you put the trees in, and you don't want them being in there for more than a year or otherwise they start thinking that's their home and they get very settled in and it's much harder to get them out. So So I suppose I'm going to go through, I just want to quickly come to maybe some resources that might be useful. We have, and these are all available to download for free from the website. The LEAF website would be a tree nursery project, which is aimed at educators, but anyone can use it. And we also have sheets on how to plant a bare root tree and mulch it, and how to grow an acorn from a seed, and also a lesson plan on native and non-native trees, just to explain the differences. So they're all available for anyone who wants to use them. And yeah.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for joining. Nice to see Donal and Niamh, looking at Niamh's videos and pictures from the Choill Bheags in Limerick. There's a lot of fond memories there for me. I think they're an amazing initiative, and yeah, I'm delighted to hear there's another good couple of them going in this year. So my name is Ray Ó Foghlú, or Ray Foley. I work with a small charity based in West Clare called Hometree. Hometree's objective is to create permanent native woodlands. We're about 4 years old. I'm just there a year, even though I've been in one way or the other involved from the start. So yeah, it began actually from a small community supported agriculture project between Milltown and Lahinch. And yeah, it was just, there was an acknowledgement that people maybe without land or without access to, I suppose, other resources that you might need to kind of make a difference with the environment, wanted to be involved in. And yeah, Hometree facilitated that by either taking donations from them and planting trees, or bringing them up for site days and putting trees in the ground. So it's after breaking away now, and it's its own entity, and really it's just kind of kicking into gear properly this year. We've got a couple of new sites. We've got, for the first time ever, we've got staff. We've got myself, I look after landowner engagement, and we can talk about that in a minute. Matt, at the far left of this picture, is the manager, and we've got an ecologist. Certainly one thing about our approach to what we're doing is we want at every single step to be in line with best ecological advice and practice. So yeah, current story. This is our first site outside of the original site up at Moy Hill, where there's already maybe 30 or 40,000 trees in, and this is it's called Deer Park. It's just between, you can actually see Lahinch out in the distance there in Liscannor Bay, and just to the right out of picture is Ennis Diamond. So it's a 17-acre site, and that's going to be our headquarters. We actually have just completed building a new little education centre and store on the footprint of some of those old buildings. The overall plan for Deer Park is to be kind of a multifunctional demonstration centre for woodland and forestry creation of all sorts. So that little diagram should give you an idea of what we're looking at there. We're going to have native woodlands, we're going to have agroforestry, we're going to have meadows, we're going to have an education centre, wetlands, natural regeneration. It's going to be a place that members of the public, but also members of the farming community and anyone else really interested in or with access to land can come and learn about kind of strategies to increase woodland cover or integrate trees into their own land or systems that they have. This is our second site. Might look kind of unusual for a native woodland charity. It's a very standard, neglected Sitka spruce forest. It's about 2 kilometers outside Milltown. The name of the place is Eilan. And the plan here is we've already got our license to manage this through continuous cover. So we're going to slowly convert this woodland into a native woodland over the next 30 or 40 years. The ash section, as you can see, has suffered from some hydrological issues. There's some flooding there, but yeah, we're going to turn that. We're going to actually leave that as a wetland. So that's our second site. We've got a third site in Wicklow, and yeah, we're pretty ambitious in terms of not just acquiring land for ourselves, because we see that as something that you know, there'll always be a huge cost limitation to the amount of land we can actually create woodlands on. I think we see a big part of our role in facilitating others who have an interest in creating woodlands on their land, be that through information or through financial help or whatever. So that probably leads me on to the next picture, which is we were successful last year in competing for EIP grant. EIP is a European Innovation Project, and basically we're working with farmers in a catchment again near Milltown Malbay in West Clare, about 6 or 7 townlands, and interspersed throughout the townlands are little woodlands like these, undocumented, unmapped, but really significant ecologically, and we're going to work with landowners to protect, connect and expand these woodlands. So that's really exciting, and we're just getting going on that project. So that's going to run for the next year, and it's as I say, I'll be working directly with the landowners and our ecologist and our forester will be drawing up plans for how they can do, as I said before, protect and expand these really interesting little pockets of native woodland. That's sessile oak. This is actually a fascinating type of ecosystem we have here in Ireland. It's a very small version of it, but they're temperate rainforests or oceanic woodlands, ones that are dictated by high rainfall and moderate temperatures. So yeah, really, really interesting ecosystem. That's what the inside of them look like. Everything is just covered in moss, epiphytes, bryophytes, lichens. They're special places. So as I said, a big part of our work is acknowledging that we'll only ever be able to do a certain amount ourselves, and we think that there's a lot of people on the ground with land or without who want to do good work. And honestly, I see farmers as, and I think Donal acknowledged it as well, planting in schools is amazing, planting in your back garden is amazing, and like every single strategy we should be working on. But at the end of the day, 70% of the country is under farmland, so really they're just a key stakeholder. And we're really going to put a lot of emphasis into helping farmers in any way we can to make things happen on their land. The prize is, as most people who are looking at this are interested in trees and forests. The prize at the end of the day, like we had a forest, we're a forest people. Our original alphabet was from the forest. Many of our towns and villages relate to forests. You know, it's many of the names of our towns and villages, and indeed our own names, like Dara, who's chairing this, you know, from the Dara, from the oak. You know, the prize is to kind of reestablish a part of our kind of cultural identity, I believe. And, you know, these places are important for so many reasons, for our mental and physical health, for water quality, for biodiversity, for carbon. And I think if we, you know, I think everyone again who's watching it probably knows we're really getting forestry wrong in this country at the moment. We're not connecting the way we need to connect with the people who can make a difference. So where are the opportunities? Look, at the end of the day, just two that always spring to mind for me is river valleys. We've got major problems with water quality, and strips of trees can act as really useful buffer strips where they can intercept nutrients or chemicals heading towards the water that would damage it. And you know, I think if we put the right incentives in place, we could reestablish some really beautiful woodland river valleys. The other big opportunities, I think, are in the uplands, and don't necessarily involve planting. You know, they may involve just reducing browsing or grazing pressure from deer or from sheep. Usually it's sheep in Ireland. Woodlands would, like there's probably no realistic tree line in Ireland. They'd probably grow up to a couple of 100 meters high. So really our mountains could and should be covered in trees. And if we just reduced or excluded grazers from certain areas, we'd see a dramatic and incredible bounce back in our native woodlands, and that would be remarkable. I think the one thing that we need to get right in all this is respect the fact that farmers culturally are food producers, and that's what they've been doing for a long time, and that's what they identify with. So I think food production has to be kept as a core aspect of what goes on farmland, especially, you know, as we move to a kind of a new system. So like, I'd like to think that the models like REIP that aren't seeking to displace farming, which forestry has tended to do in Ireland, in the last 30 years, you know, forestry comes in and farming goes out. I'd like to think that we can find ways where forestry is integrated into farm systems, and I do think that's possible.
Brendan, you'd like to add in, or that?
And I might mention something I might have jumped over it. I would be really highlighting the importance of ecological corridors, trees, and being planted as part of that. And I know Ray's referred to the kind of the woodland valley, like if trees are growing along a stream or a river, they're often called riparian. And then there's linear woodlands, which are kind of and hedgerows in a way are like the linear woodlands of Ireland, you know, except that we are usually massacring them and treating them really badly. So like, you know, when you look at the statistics of the like the land in Ireland that's covered by, you know, there's kind of broadleaf and then there's the plantations, but there's up to something like 300,000 kilometers of hedgerows. And I suppose so hedgerows, they're usually the same trees that you're planting into woodland, you're just treating them differently. You know, you're clipping them into a hedge, and maybe in the past they had a different function. But one thing, if you have any influence in terms of policies, you know, there's local area plans and, you know, all these plans that you can put into, and whether it's students doing it or people doing it personally or organizations, is trying to get in. If you're talking to the council or engineers, they talk about green infrastructure. And then if you're talking to, so everyone they've all got these different languages, and they're often used to maybe putting in hard landscaping. So a lot of engineers are really used to doing concrete walls, straight lines of canals, building, and in nature, there's no straight lines. And I suppose we see what's called the nature-based solutions, whether you're planting woodlands or hedgerows. But to me, one of the really important things is connecting the places up. Because if you're a plant or a creature living here in Ballyseedy Woods, and if you can't get to the next woodland without being killed or, you know, on the road or whatever, you know, we end up with these small gene pools, which cause a whole other problem. So for whether it's like for the benefit of all of us, ecological corridors would be a huge part of which are also called wildlife corridors. You know, there's other names for them as well. But wherever you see gaps, or you can see in road vans, the motorways, they did plant linear woodlands, and I've actually noticed more sparrowhawks and kestrels in the last few years than before. You know, now there's problems with the barn owls because they get hit by the trucks because they go along their ecological corridors, and they're at the same height as the trucks, whereas sparrowhawks and kestrels fly higher, and buzzards, they're all on the move because the creatures that they eat or the plants they need are in, you know, in those corridors. So it's just something I might have forgotten to mention in my talk, but I think it's just something that we all need to be highlighting, is how do we connect all these biodiversity hotspots up when you're thinking ahead.
I have a question here. I think maybe for you, Niamh, or if anyone else wants to jump in. When you're planting a large amount of trees, how do you water them, or do they need water? Do they need water in winter? We're planning on planting a mini native forest, but are concerned about the watering.
Yeah, springtime, and I mean, see, the last 2 years been very dry in spring, you know. So I do try and water if you can in the first year, but if it's huge amount of area, you know, you can't get to that. But if you can, I would water, yeah, if it's very dry in the late spring or summer.
And then I'd add to that, I mean, generally, okay, like it's exceptional. Sometimes we do get a dry spring, but if you're planting this side of the winter, there's been a lot of rain and there's a lot of water. Like it's back to knowing your own soil and your own land. So, and that's where mulching that Donal would have talked about, and I would have talked about. Mulching is when you're putting cardboard or organic material on the ground to keep soil, to retain moisture in the soil as well as building up soil, you know. So technically, if you, and also you have to check if your land is wet, you might need to pick more appropriate trees to a wet area like alder, willow, birch. And then if it's drier, maybe look at, you know, a lot of the other trees can handle the drier side. But I know myself and Ray, we one time in a school with Easter, the schedule of planting, we had to plant in early April, and that had the lowest success. Whereas normally, if you're planting by the end of March, generally, like, you get away with it. But in the summertime, if you plant outside of that, even if they're potted trees, you would have to water. But you try and reduce watering at all times by mulching.
Super. Question here. Would anyone like to comment on the number of hedgerows being removed as part of housing developments, and why there isn't a culture of keeping them?
It's a big discussion there. You're opening up a massive discussion, but
Yeah,
people should lobby, the politicians, that proper developments need to retain whatever biodiversity is on site as much as possible. Sure, they're just savagery when they go in, the builders, and they're just trying to make space and for their machinery. But if there's established hedgerows, they should be retained. It's
And
policy. It's policy, isn't it?
I think it's part of the generally planning permission now in Kerry. I know county by county it's different, but generally in Kerry, when you get planning permission to put up a house, you are told to leave the hedgerows, and the builders don't. So it's up to the landowner to stand their ground, to push. They have to go, this is part of it. Whereas what they're usually convinced by the builder says, take it all out and sure we'll put another hedgerow in. And then they generally put in laurel or escallonia or something that they say is quick growing. So if you are a landowner, or if it's talking, you need to chat to people and let them know they're the ones, because no one's going around enforcing that because there isn't enough staff in the council. So most builders just go for the easy solution. So it's the builder, though the contractors need to be educated, but most of them don't want to hear about it. They'll do it. You have to make the fuss, and you have to assert that the hedgerow isn't removed.
I was going to say, Niamh, on that, like it's different to like building contractors taking them out, but in terms of like what's going on farms and hedgerows, like so much work is done by contractors, and really they're just guns for hire. That if there could be a significant intervention in terms of their knowledge, that it would make such a massive difference out in the landscape. The other thing is, I just saw one yesterday, a letter from Kerry County Council to a farmer telling him, like instructing him to cut back his hedge, and he's a farmer who really he appreciates and enjoys his hedgerow. So sometimes it can be kind of easy to kind of lay blame on farmers, and sometimes they find themselves kind of between a rock and a hard place of regulation and misinformation or lack of information.
So this I'd like to just say two things before I go. I need to go back to the students. The single farm or the area aid payment would really be good if we could flip it around. So at the moment, the more grass you have, the more you get paid. If you could flip it around, that the wider your hedgerows go, then you get more payments. That would be brilliant. Or else just get rid of it at least, because I've had farmers coming into me and look, I'm going to lose this much money next year because I didn't cut my hedges, blah, blah, blah. And also texts from like Teagasc or whatever, like put on slurry tomorrow. And what was tomorrow it was Storm Dennis was going through the next day, it's like, anyway, so there's a lot of stuff there. And I'm saying, like, I'm empathizing with farmers. They're getting this mixed messaging. So if we could, give them better messaging, that would be good. And the final thing I'd like to say just before I finish is read the Wilding book by Isabel Tree, just please, because there's this wild planting of trees, like birds, like the jay bird, that we need to facilitate as well. So thanks a million. I'll send that presentation on to you, Dara.
So I want to thank Donal, Niamh and Ray for their time, and everyone for logging in. Thanks, Gary, for helping in the background. So this week is Climate Action Week, so maybe have a look at our blog for some of the other events taking place this week. And there's a competition on our Instagram, our Climate Pledges competition, if you want to have a look at that. But no, thanks Niamh and Ray, and thanks everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.